Today we're going to be kind of disseminating some information. The goal is for this to be an open dialogue as well. We have several presenters here to give information. But before we start, one of the things I think we should do is just, like I said, I'm Brent Taylor with Clackamas County. If we can pass the microphone around, because this is being recorded and we want everybody to be able to hear who you are, what program you work for, and what county that you serve. If you serve multiple counties, please let us know. If you haven't signed in, please do on your way out, just because we have just to see who's here in attendance, but also we need signage for room, food, things like that. So before we start, does anybody have any questions? Okay, so I will pass it over. Do you want to do the introduction? Sure. Yeah, I was going to. Sure. Yeah. You want to start? Sure. Okay, thank you so much.
My name is Cherie Eckert, and I am the founder of Interwork Portland Better Man program, and we predominantly serve Multnomah County and also a little bit of Washington County, and so far have not had any interaction with Clackamas County.
Chris Alfine with Allies and Change, and at this time we're working in both Washington and Multnomah County, and in the past I've worked in Clackamas County as well.
I'm Trey Nance with Allies and Change.
Stacy Womack from ARMS Abuse Recovery Ministry and Services, and we serve the Tri-County area.
Trisha Cepeda, also with ARMS.
Virginia Lopez from Enfoque La Familia, Washington County, program for Spanish-speaking clients.
I'm Tim Logan with Savalti. We're a culturally responsive agency dealing with African American and biracial men, women, and children in Multnomah County only.
Hey, I'm Dana White with Choices. We're in Washington County, Tillamook County, and Deschutes County.
I'm Brett Ackerman, also with Choices.
I'm Crystal Duff with Bridges to Safety, and I'm in Multnomah County, Clackamas County, Columbia County, Marion County, but then we have other offices around also.
My name is Matt Johnston. I'm from Domestic Violence Safe Dialogue. We do the survivor impact panels in Clark, Multnomah, Washington, and Columbia County.
I'm Linda Castaneda with Castaneda Counseling, and I have a program in Spanish and English. I primarily serve Clackamas County. Occasionally I get clients from surrounding counties.
I'm Chris Lundell with Castaneda Counseling.
Olga Parker from Modus Vivendi, Russian-speaking program, and mainly serving Clackamas County and Multnomah.
I'm Phil Broyles with Terrace Intervention and Counseling, and we're in Multnomah County. We take people from any county as long as they're approved to come to our program. And we also have outpatient, state-approved outpatient DUI and alcohol and drug treatment services. And we take Oregon.
Jackie Pankos, I'm with Central City Concerns East Side Concern Domestic Violence Intervention Program, and we also provide alcohol and drug treatment services within the program as well.
Want to keep going to all of us too, or we're good?
Shannon Barkley, Victim Services with Clackamas County Parole and Probation. And then just a tip, when you are speaking into the microphone, I know it is really weird and awkward, but hold it as close to your mouth as possible. It'll be really important when we get to the question and answer part because we want to hear all of your questions. But yeah, just make sure you're speaking directly into the mic.
Malcolm McDonald, the Director of Community Corrections here in Clackamas County.
I'm Andrew Altman with Multnomah County.
Lindsay Thrower, Multnomah County.
I'm Haley Purcell. I'm a domestic violence advocate with Multnomah County.
I'm Marci Nelson with Washington County Program Manager, and I'll be speaking to you just a little bit later about a CPC process.
Hi, I'm Carrie Kirkpatrick with Multnomah County Parole and Probation, a Community Justice Manager for the Domestic Violence Unit. Hi, I'm Rhea Duma. I manage the Crime Victim Services Unit with Multnomah County.
Nathan Anson with Washington County Community Corrections Parole and Probation.
And David Bell with Washington County Parole and Probation, Supervisor Domestic Violence Unit.
And I'm Steve Berger, Director of Community Corrections for Washington County. Did you introduce yourself?
My name is Denise Pena. I am a Senior Manager with Multnomah County Department of Community Justice.
So before I say anything else, I want to start off by just saying welcome and thank you for coming out to Clackamas County, and a special thanks to our hosts, Clackamas County, for the wonderful facility here and supplying the treats and doing all the prerequisite requirements, getting us set up for this meeting today. So thank you very much. I also want to extend a thank you and a welcome to you folks as providers partnering with us in a multidisciplinary strategy against domestic violence. As you are well aware, domestic violence tears at the very fabric of our communities. And if we're going to be successful in our strategies in preventing further domestic violence, it's going to take all of us working together. As again, you are well aware, over the last 18 years, there's been a lot of changes within our field of domestic violence. There's been laws, there's been legislation, and Oregon administrative rules dictating a lot of what we do, specifically in batter intervention programs, victim services, and community corrections. Starting in 2001 with Senate Bill 81, which kicked off, it was a piece of legislation that kicked off a process to develop rules and guidelines standardizing domestic violence interventions. That process, through that process, we've gained rules specific to batter intervention services. Those were implemented in 2006, and those were again revised in 2012. And in addition to establishing standards for batter intervention programs, most likely to end domestic violence and increase victim safety, the OARs also included some other aspects that often don't get highlighted within our business. It established standards for contacts between defendants and victims. It also established standards for the dissemination of otherwise confidential information regarding treatment. Standards that protected to the context that we could, the participation and the confidentiality of those participants in domestic violence deferred sentencing programs. And lastly, a requirement that a batter intervention program must report to the local supervisory authority any criminal assaults, threats, threatens harm to the victim, or substantial violation of any programs. That was a new aspect, kind of just clarifying some expectations. In 2003, Senate Bill 267 integrated batter intervention standards with the criminal justice requirements by requiring prevention treatment intervention programs intended to reduce future recidivism and future criminal acts, that they had to be evidence-based. Those two pieces together really are what kind of integrated our work together. Some folks may look at that and say, well, there's a unique specific set of expectations specific to domestic violence, but in our partnership, every offender that we refer to a batter intervention program has aspects of criminality that we've assessed, and we're looking to you to partner with us in that strategy. Most recently, Senate Bill 1543 passed during the 2018 legislative session, expanding the membership of the Batter Intervention Advisory Council, which was created under Senate Bill 81. Today, we have two members of that committee, myself and Chris Huffine. Chris represents Batter Intervention Programs statewide on the Attorney General's Advisory Committee, and I represent Community Corrections on that committee as well. So through our work, if there's ever any questions related to that aspect, I'm sure Chris would be a good resource for that information. I'd be glad to participate as well. But during that new piece of legislation, the membership was expanded to include separate standards and intervention programs that address male defendants, female defendants, defendants offending against same-sex victims, and circumstances in which the defendant or victim is gender non-conforming. The advisory committee is now working on those new standards, and so I'm assuming over the next year, maybe two, I'm optimistic, I think, if I say a year, recognizing how it took us, I think, 5 years to create the first version of the standards. And then it took us another 6 years for the revised standards. So it might be an aggressive timeline to come up with those new standards within the next year. But again, I'm optimistic that through participation with providers like yourselves that we'll be able to gain that expertise and develop those standards. But recognizing our work together now requires us to include reviews to meet these expectations of this new legislation and the ORS and the new laws. Our goal is to work together and minimize the impact of each of these obligations that if you took each one of these reviews by themselves, it could be fairly onerous. As Brent mentioned in the introduction, the intent of this relationship and this partnership is to minimize the challenges, minimize the hurdles, have this be an open, collaborative process. And so what we're looking to do is to work with you, try to find a streamline, find that sweet spot where we can meet our obligations that we have jointly together in a unified way, recognizing that many of you provide services in all 3 jurisdictions, if not 1 or 2. And so our goal is to work with you, especially through this process, so we can find that sweet spot and make it simple for everybody. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Steve. Good afternoon again, and thank you so much for coming. So again, my name is Denise Pena. I'm with Multnomah County. And so to kind of piggyback on what Steve was saying, we're all in this business, I think, because we want to see our clients and our offenders change their behavior in a positive way. Because if we do that, not only does it improve their lives, as importantly, if not more importantly, it's going to improve the lives of the victims and women in our society. And so this is really kind of what's driving this work. And as you guys were introducing yourselves, we heard more than one of you serving more than just one county. And so now I'm going to take you back a couple of years as to how the 3 of us, the 3 counties, Clackamas, Washington, and Multnomah, started kind of working together, knowing that we had providers that we were sending our clients to. And so we wanted to make sure that we were working collaboratively because we all are trying to achieve the same goal. And also just kind of what the responsibility is for the referral is coming from community corrections, the responsibility that we have in making sure that the clients that we're referring them to are in compliance with the OARs and everything else that Steve already outlined. And so, again, we really want this to be a combined effort. Like I said, we've been meeting every month for the last 3 years, kind of deciding that this is something that we were going to prioritize because we believe that it's that important. I believe probably about 1.5 years was coming up with MOAs or MOUs. And so that took a long time. And so I am very excited to actually finally get us here where we are actually together. And like Brent said earlier, we want this to be a dialogue. We want it to be collaborative because we need you guys to be successful because we rely on you in order to help better serve our clients. So I'm going to pass it on.
Thanks.
To Shannon.
So you guys are sitting there with your binders, and I'm sure you're looking at them thinking, there's no way I'm going to fill this. But I brought Bridges binders from our last review. So you can see you are definitely going to fill your binders. I'm sorry. But there's a lot of information that we need to get from you, a lot of OARs to go through. So there really is a lot of information that's going to be chock full in this binder. So Denise talked about us collaborating as a tri-county. So some of you who have operated in Clackamas County have gone through our process before. We kind of took the OARs and created this review form that basically follows right along with the OARs. Have you all seen the OARs? I'm assuming you have because that's how you operate. But you know that they're pretty thick, right? So for us to be able to assess for this information, our review form kind of has to be as thick. We're trying to see, do you follow along with the OARs? So what we did when we created this form was we basically took the OAR and turned it into a question. If it says you shall do this, we ask, do you do this? So when you're going through this form, I think it's a lot less daunting as you progress through it because you can kind of see how you're going to be answering things. but I do want to walk you through the form. It's going to be sent out to you electronically. I have paper copies, so you guys are welcome to flip through them. You can't take them with you because we don't want you to fill out these ones. We want you to fill out the PDF form. Bear with me for a second. I got to switch this over to the document overhead. So this is the review. When you're filling this out, we have the option. You can apply to have referrals from all 3 counties. You can just apply for one. It's totally up to you. We're going to be reviewing this all as a tri-county and going through this process as a tri-county. But you know, whatever your capacity is for service, that's just what we're asking you to apply for. So as you can see, there's some directions. It says 4 copies, but you only have 3 binders. The important piece there is you need to keep yourself a copy because we will not be able to give you back whatever you submit to us. We'll be making notes in it. We'll be scoring it. So we will need to keep that information. So it's really important that you guys keep your own copy for your own records. There's some information. This is basically what we're going to be asking you to submit. All these different policies are listed in the OARs. When you look at your binder, you can see that you have tabs. And those tabs either have numbers or policy names. So when you are organizing your information, whichever is more logical for you, feel free to put that information there. If it's more logical for you to organize by policy, put your policy under the policy tab. If it's more logical for you to organize by section number, throw it under the section number tab. It doesn't matter to us. We're going to find it in either place, but we wanted to make this process as easy for you as possible. So if you do it by policy and you don't use those number tabs, don't worry, or opposite. So you can see our section numbers follow along right along with the OARs. Those are the OAR sections. Section 1 is definitions, so there's nothing that you need to do. It's informational only. Section 2 is purpose, the purpose of the OARs in this review. But you'll see that at the end there's additional questions. So these don't have numbers, they have asterisks. When you see an asterisk, it's not something that you're required to do. These things that we have in this are for our informational purposes. We want to try and track some trends. We want to see what's going on with all of you. On this question, where do you feel your agency could use some support? Tell us how we can help you. What is it that we as parole and probation, as a tri-county effort, how can we help you and support you? So then, section 3. So this is where we get into really the meat of the review. You can see that there are tables. There's lots of tables. Some of them are just straight questions. It's important, though, for things that say yes, that you also fill out the additional information. If something is just checked yes and there's no additional information, or same with no, we're not going to be able to score that. We need that kind of backup information to support the yes or no answer. So on this table, you can see that it asks a question, a yes or no answer, and then it asks you to list the document and the page number. We do that because you all are familiar with your policies, your procedures, your curriculum. We're not. So we don't know where to look for that information. So we're looking to you to guide us where to find it. So this is one of those examples where if you have a confidentiality policy or a policy around initiating contact with a victim or partner, you would put that policy either under the policy tab or the section tab. We would go to that tab, look for that document that you list here, and look for the page number where you're saying that this appears. And so what we should find when we go there is something like this. Your confidentiality policy, this says this is the answer to question 1, this is the answer to question 2. So it goes right along, kind of, so we can easily find it and we're not looking through pages and pages to find the answer. We definitely understand that's going to take a lot of your time, which is why we've built that into our timeline for turning this in. But we also want you to know, again, collaboration. If you're having problems, if you're confused about something, if you don't know what next steps are, please reach out to the contact for your county. You guys all got that information on your title page for your binders. We are going to be available throughout this process. Okay. So the rest of this just looks just like that. Lots of questions, lots of tables, lots of places for documentation. Like I said, I have paper copies so you all can look through them. If you are applying in all 3 counties, we're going to ask that you make some outreach into those counties if this is a new one for you. So if you operate out of Clackamas and you're going to try and operate out of Washington County, reach out to parole and probation, reach out to victim services, reach out to all those agencies that the OAR says you should have that interaction and relationship with, so that you can get to know the county, you can get to know the way that they operate, expectations, all that stuff. Also, if you come across something and it asks if you have a written policy, and at this time you don't have a written policy, feel free to take this time to create one. You can even directly take an OAR and use that as your policy. Whatever works for the way that your agency operates. This isn't for us to catch you not having something. This is for us to be working with you, saying like, hey, this says you need a policy around victim contact. You don't have one, let's take the time to create it. Do you need help with that? Do you want to just use the OAR? Again, whatever works for your agency. You saw that there were charts that said yes and no. Not everything requires a yes answer, so please make sure you're reading through that. Some of them may require a no answer. Okay. Let's see. How are we going to score this? So there are separate sections in the OARs. And we didn't want to determine what was more important and what was less important. If the OAR says it should be there, we figured it should just be there. So everything is a 1-for-1 point. But with that, each section is its own separate score. And so when we talk about a passing score, it's passing in each section. So there's a possibility for, I think, let's see, there's like 17 sections that have a score. So there's a possibility for kind of like 17 different section scores that all need to meet the threshold. What happens if you don't pass a section? Don't worry about it. We're going to work with you. We're going to send a report. We're going to let you know, hey, these are the questions we feel that you answered don't match the OARs. We're either going to give you what our expectation is, we're going to cite the OAR, we're going to help you figure out what it is you need to get that point. You'll have another opportunity to then go through that process, go through all those questions, create a policy, figure out a correct answer, whatever it takes to get that point. And then you'll have time to submit that. So counties that or agencies that have already gone through the process, a little bit more prepared. But, you know, we really, again, want to be able to work with you through this process. You all are operating. I can't imagine that there's anybody in here who is not capable of passing this process. So just know that if you're missing something, if you have a question, contact your agency, your county representative. Sections 18 and 19. So sections 18 and 19, research programs and demonstration projects. If you're not doing any of those, you can just leave those blank. They won't count towards any sort of score or anything. If you are doing a research project or a demonstration project, there are some questions that we have about those because the OERs do have some rules and regulations around those. Other pieces about scoring. It can get kind of confusing because sometimes the OERs say you shall do this, and sometimes they say you may do this. If it's a you may, we don't count that as a point because it doesn't say you have to. If it's a shall, we count that as a point. In some instances, it says you may do this, but if you do, you shall. So in that instance, we have to then add some points into that calculation. So you'll see total points if you're talking to a different agency and they say, oh, I got 321 points. And you're looking and you're like, I only got 312. That's because they do those mays and they got points for the shalls. So all of your total points possible will not be the same for each agency. All right. Due date, May 17th. Giving you a little bit over 90 days. It's really important to be in contact with us. How are you doing? Do you need help? Do you have questions? As the deadline starts approaching, we're going to be reaching out to you. How are you doing? Do you have any questions? Do you need anything from us? So that we're able to get everybody on board to get their stuff in by May 19th or May 17th. That being said, I would really encourage you, please don't wait till the last minute. Get your stuff in. This is not like turning in your final exam for your, master's thesis where you don't have any opportunity to make any change. If you feel like you've got it all done, ready for the scoring, turn it in. Because like I said, we'll let you know if there is something that doesn't meet the OARs, and we'll work with you to get you there to where you do meet the OARs. So it's a lot of information. Do you guys have any questions? Yeah, hold on. Let me grab you the microphone.
Well, this may only apply to Clackamas County since we've been through the process before, but I'm wondering if there's change in that questionnaire from last time. And
yeah, so for Clackamas County people who have filled this out, this is not the exact same form. We found through going through a review of it that some of the questions were multifaceted or worded confusingly. So we tried to filter that out. So if something asks, do you provide or do you offer classes on the effects of domestic violence on children and something else, we split those. So it's just one per question. So, but you can refer to your old form because they're essentially the same questions because it's just the OERs. Yeah. Other questions? Okay, 1 second. I didn't. It should be on.
just a clarification on how you want the pages numbered. So if we put something under partner victim contact policies, and do we put a page number on that and then we're in a different tab? That's not page 1 again, right? I mean, it's page, Are you just wanting the page number to go along with what the question is? Is that what you're wanting us to say?
So if you, that doesn't sound like it's projecting. So if you put a policy under partner victim contact policies, if there's 3 pages in there, there'll be page 1, 2, and 3. Then the next one, not 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3. Same as if you put them under tab 10. Just number those pages so we know, okay, we're going to go to tab 10. We're going to find this policy on this page. Yeah. Yes. It's the bottom button.
Sorry if this is obvious, but I just want to make sure all 3 binders are supposed to be exactly the same, right?
All 3 binders should be exactly the same. Yes. And then that 4th copy for yourself. Yes. Yes.
If we aren't currently and we don't want to work with all 3 counties, do we still have to fill in all 3 binders?
You do have to fill in all 3 binders, even if you do not want to apply for all 3 counties. The binders is not one for each county, it's one for each scorer. So we're going to have a team of 3 people doing the scoring. So it's 1 copy for each person. Any other questions?
So a couple of related questions. One is you don't have to get a perfect score.
You do not need a perfect score. I think if you all will help me out, 80%? Yes, 80%
And
in
then,
each section.
And then there may be certain aspects of the standards that are difficult for multiple programs to accomplish.
Mm-hmm.
Will you kind of tag those or address those or offer a response if you're seeing multiple non-compliances?
So the question being there are some parts of the standards that are not necessarily easy for different agencies to abide by. And we do use this to track trends. And for our review, our feedback to the committee, the statewide committee, was there are some of these standards that are near to impossible for somebody to meet. So I think it's really important that they're still in there so that we have that ability to keep track of trends. The standards were created, but maybe they weren't created equal, or maybe they might be outdated. So still being able to see some of those trends. And you're gonna note, I think it's like in the first section, there's one question that asks if you worked with a victim services agency prior to your policies, and have them sign off on your policies. Well, if you didn't do that, you can never get that point. So, right, there's stuff in there that we're aware of that are weird and wonky for the scoring. So we're always going to be transparent about why we're given a point, why we're not given a point. And it'll be something for us as a tri-county to really figure out, how we're going to work with that. Yeah. Additional?
Does this tie into DHS referrals at all? Is there any connection between this process and then getting referrals from the local child welfare?
So does this tie into DHS referrals? This is for court-mandated participants, male batterers, female victims. So we're not asking you to review your female groups, your same-sex groups. This is male batterers, female victims. Once the OAR or once the statewide committee creates those new OARs, then potentially we'll be looking at that. But this is court mandated only. So if you have somebody who's child welfare involved and they're court mandated, it would apply. But if it's just voluntary or mandated outside of the court system, then the OARs do not apply for that. Our review does not apply. Hold on one second. Is this
Form is going to be in Word format.
It's going to be in a fillable PDF. Oh, thank you, because that reminds me. Because it is a fillable PDF, we have to put a word limit on the boxes because we're asking you to print them out. So if you need additional space, just make that note in the box that there's an additional page, and you can slip it in behind the page when you print everything out. We're basing these boxes off of last year's boxes, and we didn't run out of room. We're not expecting essays, just, information enough that it answers the question. So you should have enough room, but, excuse me. But if you do run out of room, you can add an additional page. We just could not create those as scrollable text boxes. Other questions? Nothing? Okay. Back here.
So are these reviews going to be part of public record and available if requested? Like the comments, the things that are written in our review forms that we send it?
Our comments are just going to be if it meets the standard or not.
Okay.
I'm not sure, Brent or Malcolm, if you could answer that. I don't know that we would have a problem with somebody looking through a binder. I just know we have to keep our stuff as part of our committee.
Okay.
I'm going to have you repeat that.
Just about everything that we do in government is subject to public disclosure and review, so I would imagine it is. I know what Department of Corrections does on CPCs is a public document, so.
So this would be for programs that are going to be in more than one county. Typically, if we're supposed to have working relationships, do we need to document that we're having a working relationship with each county's organization? For example, like victim advocates, it would be for each of the counties we plan on working in. Is that correct?
Yes. So if you're planning on working in multiple counties, if you look at the review form in section 3, I think, we have it split because the OARs say that you're supposed to be working with these certain people. We have it split between Clackamas, Multnomah, and Washington. So that's kind of the list. If you're applying to work in each county, those are the people that you need to be in contact with. If you're only applying to work in Clackamas, then you only have to worry about being in contact with those Clackamas people.
Okay, and then a couple other questions related to the same thing. One is it possible that you could provide us some working definitions of what like interface means with each of the agencies or some guidance around that? Since it seems to me people could define that very differently.
Sure. I think that's something that we can work on. If somebody would write that down of we're going to create some sort of working definition for interface, and we'll get your feedback about what it is you guys actually do and expectations and stuff.
And then to what extent have the different community members been informed of this process happening? Because I could imagine that potentially there may be additional contacts happening in the next few months if there haven't been yet.
I can talk for Clackamas County because I sit on the Family Violence Coordination Council. I've been talking about this process. So our people who come to our FECC are aware. So if you're outreaching to a county that you're not currently working with, if that's Clackamas County, people should be aware. If not, let me know, and I'm happy to do a warm introduction. Let me have Steve or Denise answer for other counties.
I can respond for Washington County. I can't speak for Multnomah, but I think the intent of this process is not to be exclusionary. This is just the first introduction, kind of the first opportunity for us to go through these reviews. So I can speak on Washington County. If we did have another community agency that would reach out and say, we want to engage, we'd like to be a part of this process, they would just, rather than getting together in a group and having coffee and some cookies and going through this as a group and get the benefits of having the group dynamic, it would probably be more of a one-on-one. Say, hey, we're streaming this video, you can take we're streaming this training, you can take a look at the training online, and you can meet with the agencies individually. But the purpose for the review is not to be exclusive, that this is your attendance today is exclusive. These are the only agencies that we will do business with. It's more of an ongoing process saying, these are the reviews that we're going to go through if you want to participate and do programming in Washington County, Clackamas County, and I'm seeing a nod from Denise that Multnomah County would do the same. So it's not an exclusive process. If somebody reaches out that wasn't here today that wants to go forward, they'll be held to the same standard, but it would just have to be, they'd have to be brought on board on an individual basis.
And would the same be true if one of the current agencies wanted to expand to another county? They would need, how would that happen? Let's say in a year an agency wants to go and offer services. What would be the protocol for them expanding to another county?
I'm going on an assumption here, so forgive me. This is kind of a work in progress, but I would believe we would take a look at the information that's already been submitted and then look for the application. How does this apply to the other county? So my guess would be, from what I would expect, like I'll base this on my relationship with you, Chris, is that if you checked off the box and said, I'm only going to be working in Washington County, but we know that you have a program that satisfied the standards. If you then checked off and contacted Multnomah County or Clackamas and said, hey, I would like to do business, I'm assuming we would be able to take that same notebook and extrapolate from there and say, how would it then apply to those other counties? And just ask you, it might be one of those opportunities for some additional information specifically to like maybe the interface. How are you interacting with the local supervisory in those counties and through which forums? But I would expect that we'd be able to do that.
I saw your hand up, Linda and Jackie.
I may have just had this answered, but just a little more specifically, I'm a small program and I don't really want to grow into other counties, but occasionally clients find their way to me. And would I be expected to turn them down if I said I was only going to serve Clackamas County?
I don't think so, because if Washington County or Multnomah County is giving you as an option, then, I think if you're just primarily focused on serving Clackamas, you're going to be getting our referrals.
Mm-hmm.
And then if one of the other counties comes across somebody who maybe doesn't work with their options for their county, they can still give the referral because you've passed the same review process. But
Well, and I think that speaks to why the 3 community corrections counties started working together, because of the fact that we are geographically so close to each other and that we know that our clients move from county to county. And so that's another reason why the 3 of us started, the 3 counties, I should say, started collaborating together. It's because of the point that you're bringing up.
But would I still just put down I serve Clackamas County then?
I would say if that's your primary, yes. If that's your primary source of referral.
Thanks. I'm going to come to you. I have Jackie. And then you'll be next.
So I'm just curious about the, working with community members. So we have an MOU with Clackamas Women's Services, Memorandum of Understanding. So, and when we did the review with Clackamas, it was just focused on that. But I know from the past what happened is we've all had an ongoing MOU with Clackamas County over the years, and Multnomah County seems to have different entities. So when I approached one of them in Multnomah County about an MOU, they said, "Oh, you already have one, so you don't need another one." And so we do provide trainings and stuff like that with, like Raphael House and stuff like that. But is this something where you would want an MOU with if I'm applying in Multnomah County to have a memorandum of understanding with an agency in Multnomah, Clackamas, and say Washington County?
So basically, the question being, do you need an MOU with victim services in each of the counties that you serve? And I think, with the OARs, it kind of says yes. But again, working as a tri-county, if you're reaching out to Raphael House, VOA, whoever, and they're saying, well, you already work with Clackamas Women's Services, so, we're not going to establish an MOU with you. Documenting that and just letting us know, hey, we reached out, we tried. You're still got that working relationship with A Victim Services, so that it makes this process easier.
Okay.
That you've tried, you've documented it. We're aware.
Okay. So and then there's like having the document versus, this is how we collaborate with this service. That
right.
Either one of those maybe. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, if you don't have an MOU, but you're still collaborating with the victim services, that you can just explain in there how you still work with them.
Okay.
Yeah, my question, I'm working for Washington County for too many years, but I'm working with the Hispanic population. And all the forms and everything, I give it to my clients is in Spanish speaking because they had to read it. And some of my clients, they don't know reading, they don't know writing. And I help them to reading and explain everything, all the process. So, and the forms, I had to put it here. So everything is about in Spanish, and I had to do that too.
Yeah, if your forms are only available in Spanish, that's what you're going to submit to us, and then it'll be on us to try and figure out how to get them translated.
Okay. Yeah, because this is what the more I see almost. Okay, the another question is, because it's a small program and Washington County, if I do only for Washington County, they have referral from Multnomah County, they can refer to me or no? Because right now, the situation right now for immigration status for the ICE and a lot of the women, maybe they don't report it, any domestic violence, because they are afraid to take care of her husband and take care of the children and her too. So the clients or referrals is low right now. So this is my question right now. So almost everything I have it, a curriculum and everything I have it is in Spanish. So I can do that with the same thing, right?
Yeah, when you're filling this out, if you only have things in Spanish, that's what you will submit to us. We might reach out to you for help with translation.
Well, yeah.
But
yeah.
we will then figure out as a tri-county how
Yeah.
we're going to translate your document so that we can review it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Question. Yes.
That just brought up the question, if we do services in English and Spanish, do you want both copies?
If they're the same document just translated into Spanish,
They are.
no, except where it asks if you specifically have your handouts in Spanish or like your pamphlets, not your curriculum. But there is a place where it asks if you offer things in other languages.
Okay.
But that's mostly for like informational material. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say I'd recommend checking on the quality of the translation because I've seen a lot of documents that are not real well translated.
Sure. Are you offering your help? No, for sure. Thanks, Linda. Any other questions? Because I'm going to pass it off to Marci, and she's going to talk about CPC, and so I'm sure you all are going to have lots of questions on that one too. All right, Marci.
So I already introduced myself once, but I'll give you just a little more detail. So my name's Marci Nelson, and many of you know me from Washington County because for many years I managed our counseling and victim services program. And so in the course of managing that program and then also providing direct services as a therapist and as an advocate, I've had the opportunity to work with victims of domestic violence as well as offenders of domestic violence, and some of those people were both. So I have kind of had a passion for what you do and a connection to what you've been doing, especially those of you who I have gotten to know over the years. And then I became involved in this process because, candidly, the CPC process started, and I started to pay attention to how that was going, and I started to believe that just like with our clients, we assess them and then we help them get to change. But it was my opinion, and still is, that we didn't do that with you all when we started to reassess for CPCs. I know the CPC's been out there quite a long time, and some of you had them many, many years ago, and some of you more recently. But we kind of did to you what we try not to do to our clients. We came in, we assessed you, and we said, now go do it. But we didn't prepare you for the process very well. We didn't have the dialogues that I would have preferred that we had. We didn't have a plan. One of the things that our Washington County Department has done in the last few years is started an implementation team and has really been using science around implementation of all the things that we do. In any organization, you implement things all the time. But a lot of times it's more like you send people to training and then you pray that they're going to do the thing that you just trained them on. So the train and pray method, you might have heard someone say before. And I think we kind of did that with you all a little bit. We said, you need to pass this thing, but we didn't give you the rubric. We didn't say these are the things that we're looking for and these are the things that we want you to develop. As a teacher, if I'm going to test somebody, I kind of want them to know what they're being tested on so they can meet that criteria when it's time for testing, right? And I think we just kind of did a disservice to our relationships with you and to the services you provide by not properly framing this CPC thing in the first place. So I started to pay attention to that, and I listened to those of you that I know, and I couldn't help myself, and I said to Steve, I'd really like to be part of this process. I think that I can be helpful. I believe in the components of the CPC, and I still do to this day after being trained in it, finally finished the requirements to be certified in it. But at the same time, I listen to you, and as a practitioner and as a victim advocate, I hear you that there are some pieces we need to dovetail for that tool to make sense to you and for it to be useful to us as your evaluators. So I got kind of excited about that. Steve let me go off to training, and now I have a pretty full understanding of the CPC. And I'm here to say to you that we're still going to expect it. And I want to be able today to do what I can to answer some questions about it, some commonly asked questions. You'll have those, and that's totally fine. Starting with what happened to them, because some of you had reviews and then you haven't had reviews for a while. And the quick answer to that is there's very few people in the state that are certified to conduct these assessments. John and Jeff Hansen, they are not related, but we call them the Hansen brothers. They're people that you've encountered probably if you've had a CPC. They're kind of the only game in town or have been for a while. And though they've trained and offered trainings to those of us who work in community corrections in the CPC, you have to then do 5 of them with those 2 guys. And then you have to lead one yourself and write a report. Well, a lot of people want to be trained and they want to know about this thing and they want to be involved. But when it comes time to actually leading it and writing the report, people just get a little anxious probably and afraid of that, just like we all do. So there's been very few people who've been able to go out and do these. And then John and Jeff have had to allocate their time to grant-funded, state-funded programs because that is the law states that the CPC must be done or that some sort of program review must be done for programs that are funded by any kind of state money. So there's a lot of those out there statewide, and they've had to focus on those, and they haven't been able to circle back and catch all the other programs. But we still are committed to the tool, and we're still committed to the process. So part of what this Tri-County group has been doing is looking at how can we make that more efficient? How can we conduct perhaps our own reviews? So maybe it's me or one of my team doing the reviews with you, and we know you, so we can have a dialogue. And how can we then use those results to drive a conversation? And I think that's the important piece about the CPC or any program evaluation. It's a template for a conversation. It's not a test. It's not like, I think Shannon said earlier, getting your master's degree and your thesis and check off and you're a good person or a bad person. That's not what that tool is meant to do. The tool is meant to measure how closely our practices are aligning with some evidence-based work that's being done in community corrections around helping people stop committing crime and start behaving like pro-social citizens. And there's a lot of research behind it that is worth listening to. And we want you all to be able to do that too alongside of us. And so that doesn't happen by testing you and then telling you you're bad, go fix it, and then not giving you the support you need to implement whatever you need to implement to get better or to maybe grow your practice to kind of merge better with our practice. My people, the people that I know well and here have heard me say this, but the business of community corrections and the business of our relationship to our external providers is different now than it used to be. We used to, in community corrections, we would send people off to treatment, and we were like, okay, check the box. They're off in treatment. Don't really care what's happening there, just glad it's happening. We trust you, and it's not that we don't trust you, but we trust you to do the work, and we listen to what you say, and we're happy. That's enough for us. But the trend in community corrections nationwide, one could argue globally, and then certainly the trend in the state has been to want quality programming to send our clients to. And I believe you all are quality programming. The question is, to what extent, and does it meet what we need met in community corrections? So if I sort of picture, a Venn diagram, if I had a whiteboard, that would be helpful. But we've got community corrections over here, and we're concerned with criminality. And we're concerned with other things. We're all concerned with other things, but really the scope of our practice is criminal behavior and stopping criminal behavior. And then we've got your diagram over here. Your diagram or your circle is health and relationships and people not hurting each other. And some of that's, going to overlap, and we're going to be concerned about criminal behavior together in our circles, right? But I get, and we all understand, that you're concerned with the broader aspects of family health and family violence and stopping verbal abuse, psychological abuse, financial, all the things that at this point in time in our culture are typically not against the law. And we greatly appreciate that you are targeting those things. At the same time, we still have to be concerned with our circle, and we have to be concerned with criminal recidivism, and that is just the scope of our practice. So what we're looking to do with the CPC is deal with that bubble in between. What can you do in your work as providers to help reduce criminality so that we meet our goals and our mission and values to stop criminal behavior? And those are not always clean, are they? And sometimes you're spending time on things that we're like, oh, that's not really what we need you to spend time on, but we understand that you're doing that and why you're doing that. And you could probably say the same thing about us too. So hopefully we can kind of find a happy medium where we're addressing our bubble and you're addressing your bubble, but we all kind of work together around reducing crime, in particular, reducing family violence crime. Does that make sense? Okay. So for now, I want to talk about the CPC and I want you to be able to ask questions about it, but to kind of lower anxiety, our team can only do so much. And right now the SB 81 binders, that's where all of the focus is going to be for a little while. So those are going to happen first because it just kind of makes sense. And then we'll circle back and we'll start planning and doing CPC reviews again with all of you who want to be qualified providers. Kind of related to that qualified provider thing, we tried to communicate it in writing, but if you have any questions about that, let me know. Our feeling or our intention is 3 counties would have a group of people that we know do good work. And we know they do good work because we know you. but also because you've passed certain standards for us to be able to confidently refer to you. One of the frequently asked questions is if the CPC is only required for agencies that receive state or public funding, why would you make me go through a CPC when my clients are self-pay? And our answer to that is around ethics. If legally, and one could argue ethically, we can only refer to programs or subsidized programs that have passed this tool and are providing evidence-based practices, we kind of feel like we can't, in good conscience, refer clients to programs, even if they're self-pay, that maybe don't quite meet those standards. And that's just where we as a Tri-County group have come down on that question. But we also believe you can all get there. And we're here to help you with that process. So that's just kind of a little bit of how I come at this and how I believe our team wants to approach this process with you. How many of you had a CPC done? Okay. How many of you have no idea what I'm talking about when I say CPC? Okay, fair enough. So just briefly, the CPC it stands for Correctional Programs Checklist. And it was designed by the University of Cincinnati to be a program evaluation tool to measure how closely a community-based program aligns with the prevailing evidence-based practices in community corrections, specifically around how you are targeting criminogenic risk, need, and responsivity. And so if you've never really thought about how you target those before, or those terms aren't something you use every day, don't fret. We'll help you get familiar with them through the process. And I would say the more that I know about the work that you do, the more I believe you actually are targeting those things. We just may not be using the same terms or looking at it quite the same way, and that's okay. And so again, template for a conversation. It's a way to look at your program through the lens of what is effective to, or we believe is effective to stop people from committing more crime. And because you're dealing with part of our bubble, we want you to be able to do those things too. So that's what it is in a nutshell. Where'd my clicker go? There's some basic elements of the CPC that the tool looks at. And the first one, the organizational aspects, tends to be something that everybody passes. And it has to do with such things as you're all qualified by training, by education, by practice. So what are your credentials? Most programs tend to do pretty well with that. And then the idea of having really clear and transparent policies that anybody could go into your organization and say, this is what they do. This is how they do it. That when you hire somebody new, you can show them this is what we do. This is how we do it, which is just good organizational practice. Your staff and you having a good sense of what your policies and procedures and expectations are is good organizational practice, regardless of what service you're providing. And then that you have ongoing training for your facilitators, that they are onboarded properly, that they know what you expect, and that they are trained in the curriculum that you provide, and they're providing it in a relatively consistent way. And there are more pieces to that. It gets a little detailed, but in general, that first piece looks at that aspect. The second piece, and perhaps a little more important, is how do you use assessment to drive what you're doing with your clients? As a therapist, I admit I've had times when I've provided therapy, didn't do any kind of assessing, just had a gut feel about people and what I thought they needed from me, and they seemed to be getting better. And I believed in that. I thought I had good instincts, and I can just read people, I know who they are. But the more that I have studied evidence-based work, the more that I've studied assessment and why we do assessment and how sometimes we can be a little biased and have our own lenses, and sometimes you need a little objectivity in how you're looking at people, the more I believe that there is a happy balance of assessment and that human instinct that you all have as helpers. And so we're not looking to take away your human instinct when we talk about assessment, but we are looking to add more objectivity to it. and a common language between you and the POs and your clients around what we're really targeting with these people when it comes to their change. So we are looking for consistent use of risk tools, the LSCMI, the WARNA, which is a gender sensitive or gender, I don't want to say specific, but more for females and has to do with how trauma might impact their criminality. We want people appropriately assessed at the front end so that you and the PO know where this person is and what are the target areas for their criminal behavior and their change. Now, sometimes some of you who had the CPC might have not necessarily gotten points for risk assessments, and in part, that's community corrections responsibility too. In Washington County, we expect our POs to conduct these assessments in a timely manner and get them to you in a timely manner. And if that's not happening, then that's work that we need to do. Now, unfortunately, the CPC, the way it's structured, they're not scoring us, they're scoring you. And so if those assessments aren't there in the files and you're not using them, you can end up not getting a point for that. But here we are as Tri-County saying we're going to do everything we can to make sure that there's no reason why you wouldn't get a point for risk assessment, because we ought to all be doing it and sharing it with you. The other piece is responsivity. What are the factors that contribute to some, individual factors that contribute to someone's difficulties? And so the CPC looks at, are you using validated responsivity tools? So as an example, in the BIP meeting this morning, I remember the question came up or a comment came up around learning ability and getting homework done. Are you using any kind of validated assessment for somebody's learning level or, their cognitive ability to take in what it is you're giving to them? If you are, great. That's what we're looking for. Same thing with depression, anxiety, Beck's depression scale, or whatever validated tools you might want to use. We're looking, do you have a couple of those for your individual clients? And are you looking at those factors that might be somehow impacting what they're learning from you and how they're changing? The other important thing about assessment in the CPC is we want the clients to know what their scores are. We want you and our POs to be having a conversation about their risk scores and the areas that we want them to develop and get better at. If they score really high at having kind of bad people, associates that they're around all the time, that's a good goal area for them to be working on in their groups with you and also with their POs as their other change agent in their life. We just kind of want to have some focus so that your services are much more potent and so are ours. Because we believe people will get better and that we will have good outcomes if we do it this way. Now, we could do it this way for many years, and hopefully we're collecting data, and it could all be pointless. And at that point, we'll course correct and we'll figure out what the next thing is, and we'll try that. But this is somewhat of, a combination of we're doing this, it's uncomfortable, we're doing it anyway, but also an invitation for you to come alongside with us and test this and see if we can make this useful for all of us. I know the font is small. You will get these slides. You'll actually get more information from me than is in these slides. But the big meat of passing a CPC or adhering to evidence-based practice is how you're actually doing your work with people in groups and to some extent individually. So how do you structure your groups? How are you spending your time? Are you targeting, again, our bubble? We care that you're targeting our bubble. We're a little selfish like that. But how are you targeting their criminogenic factors? In treatment, what are your actual strategies, and are those evidence-based? The CPC cares about that. In particular, and I know there's been a theory, I think, historically that we don't get to tell you what the rubric is, but I'm going to tell you that a huge part of passing the treatment characteristics section is that you are using evidence-based adult learning theory, which says that adults tend to learn what's relevant to them, and they tend to learn what they practice. So you can talk about it all day. They can watch a movie with you. You can have really great discussions and dialogue, and you can think, oh, they're getting it. But then what happens when they actually go to sit with a person? And this isn't just for the clients that you're working with. This is for all of us. In fact, today I would say we're not really using adult learning theory with you because we're not having you get into practice with any of this. We're just giving you a lot of information and sending you out the door. But adults learn by doing. Currently in our department, we have implemented coaching. So we've got our supervisors doing coaching with their staff. And they've been doing great at that. They've learned how to have one-on-ones. They do them on a regular basis. But the deeper that we get into the practice of that, the more questions come up around things like, how do you have a conversation with somebody when they're not performing well? What are the actual words that you use? What if that person says blah, blah, blah to you? Then how do I respond to that? And so the way to learn that is to practice. And that's what we want you to be doing with your clients. And we mean practice in kind of a specific way. So here's a little, I don't know if you can read that, but the cone of learning. So after 2 weeks, we tend to remember if we read about 10% of what we read. If we hear it, like I'm talking to you today, you'll probably, in a couple weeks, you'll remember about 20% of what I'm telling you right now. If I were to show you a video or, you were able to see us enact something for you, you'd remember that a little better. And then if you actually were participating in this discussion, so chiming in, those of you who've had a CPC, if you were chiming in about it, you would actually be retaining more of that than you would just as a passive listener. But if you teach a skill and you demonstrate the skill, so if I taught you a skill right now and then you saw me up here demonstrating that somehow, and then I had you all practice, and then I and my colleagues were giving you feedback on your practice, in 2 weeks, you remember about 90% of what we were trying to teach you. It's powerful. I know many of you do skill practice, and I think there's usefulness to it, and I don't want to imply that what you're doing right now isn't useful. It is. But if you're not showing them how to do the skill, the chances are they're going to kind of wing it, and they might be a little better than they were. But the potency of your time with them is going to be huge if you're showing them what it is that you're trying to teach them to do, and then you are having them try to learn that from you, to mimic you in some way. And then you're giving them feedback and helping them improve. Now, there's only so much time in a group, right? But if you could add this and maybe think about what else you might be able to shave off of there, they would get there faster. Not to belabor it, but it's sort of like, I could have you all read a book or watch a video about how to play guitar. But if you didn't have one in your hands and you weren't playing it and we didn't give you any kind of feedback about how you were playing it, you probably wouldn't learn how to play it. You just wouldn't learn it in the same way. So insight's important, but practice, it's how people make the connection between what happens up here in their frontal cortex and what happens when they're faced with a situation out there in the world. So that's a big part of it, and that's why I'm spending a little time on it. Our intention, though, when we get to the point of doing these again, is to have a training so that we can all learn this piece of it and learn how to do group work in this way. So again, I'm telling it to you now, but I don't expect you to just know how to go do it with your people. We're going to try really hard to make sure that we all learn it together and get into practice. So the final piece of the CPC is quality assurance. What are you doing on your end to ensure that your services are consistently well done? So when we do CPCs, one of the things we do is file reviews. We're looking, you might say to us in an interview, yes, we look at your risk assessments. They're super helpful. We use them with our clients. But we're going to be looking at, are those risk assessments consistently in the files? Do your treatment plans show that you're considering those risk assessments and the pieces of that in how you're doing your treatment planning? Do the case notes reflect progress toward the goals? So the more sort of tight, I would say, your documentation is, the better. Show us your work. The other piece of it is clinical supervision. Even those of you who maybe don't have to have clinical supervision depending on your credentials, or those of you who are licensed and no longer need it because you're licensed, whatever that is. The coaching that happens, again, giving you feedback as you practice, will ensure that your facilitators are providing the very best services possible. This can be a hard one to do because we're not paying you to provide clinical supervision to your facilitators, by the hour, if you will. But if you're doing a group and you can have an outside third party, and I don't even think it necessarily has to be, master's level clinical supervisor, even if, I'm looking at Stacy, if Stacy sat in on her facilitators group, quietly watched, took some notes, sat with that person afterward and gave some feedback and helped them improve their practice, that's what we care about, because they're going to provide a better service with your oversight about how they're doing their work. So these are the kinds of things that the CPC is looking at. Is it DV specific? No. But I think of it more like a skeleton of just good program practice that you then get to build all your expertise and everything you know on top of. These are the basics of what we believe is good evidence-based treatment, therapy, learning, skills, whatever you want to call your programming. The final thing I'll say about the work that we're asking you to do with the standards, but also the work that we'll be asking you to do with the CPC is a huge part of it is just showing us. I mean, the discussion we were having this morning, Chris did a nice job of facilitating around what's effective for working with DV offenders, like in your groups. I just couldn't help but think that so much of what you do, for example, targets attitudes and belief and antisocial behaviors that these folks have, and those are criminogenic target areas, but you are addressing those things. And sometimes, in particular, I think when we have external CPC reviewers who aren't part of what you're trying to do, it's easy to look at the way you describe what you're doing and the way the CPC describes what we want and go, wait, those don't match. But if someone's criminality is driven by objectifying their partner and seeing them as not human, well, then that is certainly an attitude and a belief and an antisocial behavior that is worth targeting, because that means they're less likely to hurt their partner if you're targeting that. Your challenge is to make that clear to anybody who's reviewing your program with this tool. And we here are willing to help that be the case. We want you to get credit for the good work that you're doing. And I think sometimes that has been maybe not seen, but it's our intention, it's certainly my intention to make sure that that happens for you. So what questions can I answer about the CPC?
So actually, these are more requests. One is, I think, at least from doing the CPC with all the programs in Washington County, you already have an idea of areas that we are, according to the CPC, weaker in. So one of the things I'm wondering about is if you see trends, could it be possible, even prior to doing the CPC with us again, that you could offer additional training or supports in the trends that you've already seen where perhaps we could do better, especially the ones that are across programs? So that's one request. And the second request is I think there's certain aspects of the CPC that don't fit well with better intervention programming. And I'm wondering if another possibility would be if you could offer some thoughts about how programs working with abusive partners could address that area. One, the most obvious one is the punishers and rewards one, or at least one of the more obvious ones that many of us have had questions about is that. So those are, I guess, a couple requests that could even be done ahead of the CPC that would allow us to potentially be more in line with those when we actually get those reviews done.
Yeah, absolutely. A while back, one of the proposals that I made to our own executive team was to run, I kind of like data now, I never used to, but I'm sort of a geek about it, but to run a Pareto chart, which is basically looking at your fails. So all of you that have gone through the CPC, where did you tend to fail the questions? Because as a teacher, if I give a test and most of you fail a certain question, that's on me, that's not on you. That means I didn't teach you well enough, or the tool's flawed, or whatever number of other things that go into that. And so, because one of the things, for an example, one of the things that tends to be a fail is the treatment approach, specifically the skill practice, which is a few points because there's a couple different components to that. Most of you haven't passed that part that have had the CPC. Well, that's on us then. So our intention is to look at what are you all kind of struggling with, and then provide training and coaching to you. Almost, I would say I'd rather do it as a group, right, than train you and train you and train. So yeah, for sure, that's already something that we'll plan and be thoughtful about ahead of time. And then the other piece of what you said, Chris.
The other part is that certain aspects of the CPC don't really apply. So again, the vast majority of the research the CPC is based on does not involve domestic violence perpetrators. It involves people who've committed felonies. So some of it obviously is still relevant. Other parts of it don't translate so well. And I think providing us ahead of time, again, guidance on how within our particular work we can meet that, or how does that translate? And there may be actually, honestly, elements that don't translate, and then conveying that as well.
Mm-hmm.
And the example that I gave was the rewards and punishers, which makes a whole lot of sense when you're in an inpatient setting or you're incarcerated. Makes a whole lot less sense when you're coming into an agency once a week for 2 hours. So I think that's where, if we could get some guidance or some adjustments to our particular subpopulation of how the CPC applies in this area, given that the research it's drawing on, it's a little bit of apples and oranges, because it's on primarily based on research that aren't the same population we're seeing, the felons who.
So yeah, I would say definitely. And I know that the earlier versions of CPCs had some cut and paste that was like, I think Christy from Family Focus was mentioning, it would actually mention institutional recommendations and, didn't have any. But I will say the ones that I've been involved in more recently, and the drafts that I've been able to review by John and Jeff, they're getting much better because they're talking to programs who are doing some interesting things around rewards and punishers is an unfortunate word, I think, probably for most of us helpers. But there are community-based programs that are doing some things that have gotten that point that are fine. And also, it tends to be sometimes that you are doing those things, but it may not be clear at the review. So agency might be doing some kind of rewards in group, like let's say attendance or giving a gold star on the homework or whatever that is. But then it's not in the policy. So when you review the practices, again, as an outside person coming in, it looks like maybe you don't have those. But all it would take is about, if you're a quick enough writer, I suppose, an hour or two to type up a couple paragraphs about how you reward behavior and how you discourage bad behavior. And then when we do the groups, we might see it. Or when we talk to an offender and say, how does your facilitator deal with somebody who's acting up in a group or whatever? And those all kind of agree, then you get credit for it. I think some of it is this showing your work idea. You may already be fine. But also, yes, there are other pieces that I think it's just a matter of translating, and they do apply, or they apply well enough that it makes us just do the better work that we want to do, rather than necessarily being super black and white. So our intention now going forward is to have this ongoing dialogue, whether it's as a group with you all during a training or whether it's doing our individual coaching with you, and say, okay, where do these agree and what might we do to get there? Yeah, nobody wants anybody to fail this thing, but we do want to test it, and we want to believe in it, and we want to see where it takes us. So yeah, that would be my intention anyway.
So Marci, you probably heard me talk about this before, because I know initially we were told that this is about lowering recidivism. And so I guess this is also kind of a request that somehow numbers are ran so that you guys even know where your baseline is, so that as we're going through these processes that they can be ran again to see if it's actually making a difference.
Yeah, I would love that. So at this point in our department, we're super excited about data, which again, helpers typically, I don't know, we kind of resist it a little bit. But we have dashboards that we're using now. It's a partnership with Multnomah County so that we can measure some of these things, and in particular, some of these things with the offenders that we're working with and how our POs are working with people, what's successful, what isn't. And, with any implementation, you kind of start baby steps and then you grow it from there. But I would love to have you all involved in a similar process of not only us reporting to you better data about our recidivism and what's happening with folks, but also helping you have access to a way for you to measure what you're doing. I think that it's the case that, you don't have completely validated manualized treatment for DV. You all do different things, and I think that's necessary. You have to try things because we just, it's such a new, it's an old behavior, but it's such a new thing to try to change in other people. And I think there's something important about doing what the research suggests is a good idea, but also measuring what good things you're doing out in the world. When I teach counseling students, I tell them, and I really believe this, that you can try to be Carl Rogers or any other counselor that has come before you and written books and whatever, but only Rogers can be Rogers. Only Adler can be Adler. You all have the opportunity, I think, to contribute to the body of knowledge about how to stop people from committing domestic violence crimes. And so it's almost like you can do, when you have the technology and the ability, you can do your own research. If you had a group, Stacy, you could theoretically have some way to collect from the people that were just in that group how much they move toward change or away from change. And so my dream, or my big dream for all of you, would be to be able to have you have dashboards where you're measuring what you're doing and you're able to tweak what you're doing and get better and better all the time.
Part of that's, I've been asking the last 5 years, maybe having them run our numbers on any guys who complete for the last 5 years and keeping that for ourselves.
I think that's doable. I mean, Steve can speak to that a little better, but I don't see why we wouldn't be able to get you that information.
I'm just wondering, of course, we would have a backup or whatever, but can we have solely electronic files, or do we have to have paper files also? I've never been able to get confirmation on that.
Well, that might look different amongst counties. In Washington County, we actually require you to use a very specific electronic records program called Client Progress Online. So I'm not sure how the other counties handle that, but in our case, we do have you use that because that actually enables our POs to get in and look at the progress and look at attendance and other pieces. It's a kind of a communication tool. So
Yeah, I use that, but so in that case, do you have to have paper backups, or can you just have electronic backups?
I can't really, I mean, from our perspective, that would be adequate documentation, but there might be some other reason why not.
So thank you, Crystal, for bringing that up, because our agency, so we're combined alcohol and drug and domestic violence. So we have federal confidentiality and things, but our agency also went to electronic health records. And so the challenge is what gets scanned into the electronic health records. The goal is to get rid of paper files. And we're like, it's like, oh, EHR is this A&D focus and not so much the DV. And it's like, okay, what we'd like certain things scanned in. And so as we work through that, what will, I'm curious as what the expectation will be as far as files and what do we keep on file. We weren't able to use what, the program you had mentioned just because of HIPAA laws. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and I don't know. I can tell you at least CPC doesn't care. So whether you have a paper file or electronic file, from that perspective, it doesn't matter. But there might be other factors at play, or your own counties and agencies and things that have rules. So, yeah.
This is exactly the same question. In terms of doing this, when we're just trying to get on this list where we are being able to be referred, we use specifically CPO. That's all I use. And I have every document that I have for my client in CPO because it's secure, it's approved by Multnomah County and Washington County. So I don't have huge paper records because I feel like A, that goes against Oregon's Sustainability Act. B, it hurts our trees and we need them to breathe. And C, it's just a lot of stuff in a wall that nobody ever looks at. And during this process, when you come to inspect us, are you going to be looking for me to output everything I have in CPO and put it in a hard file?
Shannon can answer that for the SB 81 stuff and the whys and wherefores.
So SB 81, it does not say that it has to be paper. There is a little bit about what has to be in a file. But the only other caveat with that is that the mandated authority or the LSA have to be able to have access to the file, as well as the client. There's a process for a client to be able to request access to their file. It doesn't say if it has to be paper. So for us, we ask if you have these things in your file. It is something that we are not physically going to go to your office. We're going to let the CPC do that. So like some of these things are things that we'd only be able to check by going to your office. We're just going to ask if you have them, but then we're going to rely on the CPC.
So when you're asking the question, do you have these in your file? You are specifically referring to a hard file, not to online file?
No, in fact, I did a CPC review last year where they had electronic files. And when we did file review, they just set us up with a laptop with a projector. And we clicked into them and we were able to look at them and we didn't need anything paper-wise. Yeah. We have about 5 minutes left. The other thing I want to say to you all is we don't go away. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to any of us. Your binders have your kind of go-to person to ask questions. The change happens through relationships and so does improvements. And so we want to be a resource to you.
So this is more of a pitch. I think that it's exciting, the idea of coming together to do more quality control, more training. I think another part of this is providing us with the financial support to do good quality work. And I think that we are often stuck. We are aware that many of our clients are working class and don't have a lot of money. And so on the one hand, we're pressed to offer low fees, but at the same time, if anything, we're expected to do more and more. And so I would just ask, as you're looking at this, is what can we do to financially support these folks? Many of us who are doing this because we believe in it, but we don't have necessary salaries or benefits or things of that nature. So, and I think that's another part of what we know. I think even in CPC, they talks about that is the adequate community funding to support this stuff. So I would just ask that continues to be part of your equation as well, is how can we make these services affordable for our probationers, but also support the people who are doing this work, being able to stay in this field for a while and actually make a living doing it.
Yeah, I think so, Chris. I mean, certainly we'll pay attention to that. And I would encourage you to do the same. We are asking you to do things and more things than maybe we used to ask for in the services that we subsidize or the services that our clients are self-paying for. You are business people, right? You have to look at what the cost is to you and charge accordingly. And it might be time for a shift in what we're thinking about in terms of what we're paying you and what you're worth. I mean, we have a similar situation in community corrections where we're asking people to do more and take on more work than maybe we used to. And so we're having to go back to our funding sources and say, yeah, it turns out we're doing this and that now. We need more. So I think that business model might have to change as we ask you to give us more than maybe we used to ask. So, yeah.
And one of the questions in the SB 81 review of those asterisks is, what can we do to support you? So if you have ideas, put them there. Obviously increased funding, but if you have ideas about how that can be achieved or how we can help support that, please make sure you're writing those down, because that's something that we all want to work together to figure out how we as community corrections in this Tri-County area are helping to support our providers.
One last thing I wanted to mention about the qualified provider idea. What we're looking to do is have a list of you all who have met certain standards, so we feel confident referring to you. But that doesn't mean that a self-pay client can't come to you if we haven't referred them. It just means our POs won't be actively referring to people who maybe aren't on the list. But because of consumer choice and a person's right to seek out their treatment from qualified people in the community, I mean qualified by credentialing, you might still have someone come to you who maybe wasn't referred to you by parole probation. And that's fine. We're not going to put any kind of limitation on that at this point. With our clients, we're not going to say you can't go see so-and-so because they're not on the list. At least that's not how we're handling it in Washington County. But what that will mean for the client is that they need to make sure that things happen for them that need to happen for their case management. So quarterly reports, if they're not getting quarterly reports sent to the PO quarterly, right? Or they're not getting updates on attendance, that kind of thing. Our position is we're going to hold that offender client accountable for the services that they're seeking out on their own. So we're kind of looking at that a little differently. So if you had a client in that circumstance and they weren't getting the quarterly reports, we might be saying to them, you need to get those, you need to talk to your provider and get those, or you might have some consequences that happen as a result of your choice around your provider. But so don't fret that you should turn people away or anything like that. That's not what we're looking to do. Just wanted to clarify because that was a question.
Pass, for instance, or if a person chooses just to be a private provider and they want to use CPO, which they know you are using, will they still have access to that, being how they're not an approved VIP?
Well, since you pay for it, I don't see why not, but I might not be the person to answer that question. Yeah. Yeah, I don't see why you couldn't continue to pay for that. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for being with us today, and we'll be in touch. We'll have ongoing conversations about all of this, I'm sure, but we sure appreciate what you do and see you as crucial to everything we're trying to do. So thanks so much.